Hi, moving on, and now we will dive into Studio One to see how the MIDI is configured for external instruments and control surfaces in Studio One. So let's jump right into it. Okay, let's start Studio One to see how the MIDI is configured in Studio One. And when the Studio One is starting, it goes through, its plugins and like the basic stuff. And now then it notifies me about my MIDI configuration that it has changed, as I have not empowered all my external synthesizers. So do you want to reconnect your external devices now? I say yes, and this is pretty much the screen in which you can see and set up both external instruments through MIDI as well as your MIDI controllers. Currently I have here different controllers, and all my external synthesizers have been connected, as well as monogram module connected, and so on and so forth. So one can see that which ones are active and which ones are missing. Like I haven't powered my Moog 1, so it shows a triangle over there. In principle, Studio One also detects things automatically, at least the controllers that it knows. And my plan is now to plug in the Atom SQ, which is a native controller from Presonus for Studio One. And you can see that it will detect it automatically. It does detect some other devices as well automatically when plugged in, but now I plugged it in, and now you see that Atom SQ appeared over here. If I would like to manually configure, for example, let's look at TR8S. Let's go to an edit mode, but basically there you have the device name, the manufacturer, and then you can define your own name for it. If you would like to receive MIDI messages, you of course define receive from and then send to, and I'm sending to all the MIDI channels basically in TR8S. Here you can also select that what type of MIDI information you will send, like send MIDI clock, so it means that it will synchronize the external instrument with my digital audio workstation. Or if I want to also like use arpeggiator or something from my external instrument, I could use clock start, so it will start the arpeggiator or whatever. And you can select sending a MIDI clock or time code, but in this case I have selected to send MIDI clock. And so it keeps the external synth, and in this case the drum machine synchronized. However, this Atom got automatically added, and you can see it here. So you don't really need to configure anything over here if you don't want to change the kind of default configuration for it. And when it comes to other instruments like Oberheim, I have that connected. But I also don't want to receive anything from it. If I would like to, then I would just click OBX8 here, and now I would also receive MIDI messages from it, and this would enable me to kind of use it or receive MIDI messages from it. However, I say no over here because I only want to send MIDI notes into my external synthesizer. If you add a new one, you have a list of, you can do a new keyboard if you have a MIDI keyboard or MIDI controller that you want to add, or an instrument, or then if you have a control surface, meaning a MIDI controller that you would like to add. So then you would go basically a new control surface and select that one. There are some, and quite many of these are by default given. But for example, for Metasystem, I needed to configure this into the right folder for it to be visual. But MetaGrid and MetaSystem has a good instruction on how to do that in case you wanna use the MetaGrid controller with your Studio One. That I have configured over here, as you can see. So I already have that configured. But anyway, that is pretty much when it comes to configuring a MIDI device in Studio One. Let's move on. And let's create an empty project and say OK. And then of course everything starts from the fact that if you would like to now utilize your external MIDI, you could basically then go and add a MIDI track. So you go and add track and add an instrument track. In this case, by default it comes with no instruments, but then here you can actually select that into which MIDI you will send it. Like for example, I would say that let's send it to OBX8. However, this is just the MIDI track, so it will send the MIDI out. We can go to an inspector and see that as well, that you know how and what kind of configuration it is. I could send it to specific port, but now it goes to all inputs in OBX8. I could basically also have a channel selected, but I think in this case this is pretty much enough. So now I'm able to send MIDI messages over there into the external synthesizers, but you don't hear nothing. And in order to hear something, of course, I need to add an audio track, stereo in this case. Then of course I need to select, as we looked this in the previous sessions, that how to route audio in and out. From here I now need to go and select the right channel to, and then of course arm it to hear it. And this is pretty much it. So how to get MIDI in. Then of course you also have the possibility to get MIDI in and out. So the out is here defined and in is here. You could basically say that I just want to get the MIDI messages from my Atom, and now if I would play any other keys or any other MIDI controllers, I would not be able to play this instrument. But usually I basically have this also on all inputs, so every MIDI controller that is capable of doing MIDI notes will send notes into an instrument track. And that's pretty much it when it comes to Studio One and MIDI configuration. So Studio One is pretty straightforward when it comes to MIDI configuration, and if you don't do that during the startup time, there are multiple ways for you to get there. So you go into the preferences, and then you go into the external devices. Here is where we discussed and we looked at an audio setup, but then you would just need to select an external device, and then you would basically go and configure the new devices over here. And that's basically pretty much it. Also, you can access this from the main menu. Like if I go from here, I just close this one. I'll just close it. I don't want to save it. So here, if you click on here, you basically go to preferences, from where you can go to the external devices. So just to repeat that. So here where you have your controller section, you have configure audio devices, configure external devices. You click on this and it actually will open up the preference for you. And from here you can deal with all your MIDI devices, being those instruments or controllers. All right. So as we have seen, Studio One is kind of similar towards Pro Tools configuring MIDI devices, and where everything is nicely in one place and you can do control surfaces, you can do external instruments and so on and so forth in a quite sufficient manner. Next we will jump into Luna and see how the Luna is configured for external MIDI instruments and controllers. Remember to subscribe for the channel for more content. Thanks for watching. Bye now.